Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I'm so excited to have you here with me today. If you have not listened to the first part of this episode, I strongly encourage you to go back and find part one. So I am here again today with Lisa Boate. I am so excited to continue this conversation. We had a really in-depth conversation around menopause and perimenopause, and my mind was blown. I was literally telling Lisa this. I had to call my mom up and I had to have a conversation with both of my sisters after this call, just because I didn't realize how much I didn't know. So we decided that we wanted to continue this conversation and really dive into some other important pieces, from advocating for yourself to your support system at home to having conversations with your children as well, so that you can create more of this space for this kind of in-between space that I feel like we are still in this day. So Lisa, thank you again for coming back for part two today. Do us all a favor, give everybody kind of a quick, interview of who you are, and then we're going to dive straight into all of this awesomeness today.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Kat was telling me about her conversation, I was like, welcome to the menopause warriorhood. It is such a beautifully powerful place to be. And so I'm wearing my Fleetwood Mac Sister Moon shirt for this interview because there's this swelling feeling of community that I am so proud to be part of. And it's my favorite thing to welcome more people into this conversation, because it is a space of getting to know our bodies, getting to know ourselves, and how that creates the context of our sort of midlife reality. So thank you for having me back. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So I'm Lisa Boate. I'm a certified menopause coach. I was an educator for 20 years. During COVID, like most people, started thinking about how I really wanted to live the rest of my life. That period of time was very stressful. I also was heading last years. My kids were in their late teen years. And I started noticing physical changes in myself that I didn't understand. Like my hair was falling out, and I have always been a great sleeper, and I was starting to notice sleep disturbances. My anxiety was higher than it had ever been. I found myself crying in my car coming home from work every day. And that led me to a place of I cannot keep doing this job. And I was thinking that all of those symptoms were tied to stress, which absolutely they were. And as I moved through my journey, I also realized in retrospect that they were early symptoms of perimenopause that I did not know or understand. And so I would not have changed my decision to leave education. And it would have been really nice to have been able to make a fully informed decision, knowing exactly what was happening in my body and how my world was intersecting with that. And so that's what's brought me to this work, menopause coaching, and working with organizations to create menopause empowered workplaces. Because, so I'm Canadian. US data is very similar, but 1 in 10 women are leaving the workforce due to unsupported menopause and perimenopause symptoms. And that may be the right choice. That might, like me, that was the right choice for me, and it might not be. And we just want to make sure that there are spaces where people feel supported, cared for, to be able to continue to do the really good work that they've been doing, and that comes with being at this stage of life.
I love this so much. And I love that you are advocating for this in the workplace as well, because I never would have thought about that. And, especially with my background in the medical field, the majority of the people I worked with were women, right? Your nurses, your front desk staff, like most of them are women. Well, we already know that we're cranky and ornery at certain times of the month to begin with, but I can't imagine how this could help and could also teach people to give each other grace for certain things that they're doing in their life. And I love the thought process of it being more of a conversation versus a behind the scenes thing that we don't talk about and we try to handle, but then when it bleeds over into everything else and people are wondering what the heck's going on, we feel shame to have the conversation, when in reality it's just it just is what it is. So while we're kind of on the subject then of the workplace, let's start there and then we'll move into home dynamics. I would love to get your thoughts on how you have been working with organizations to have this kind of support, and any tips that you feel like could help people, whether they are going through it, see people that are going through it, or even the men on the other side that are just trying to figure out how on earth they even could support someone through this in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing up the men aspect, because this is a conversation that is for everyone, right? We have to stop thinking about women's bodies as being isolated to just, oh, that's just a women's conversation. Because the word is coming up as demoralizing, but that's not the word I'm looking for. And this is one of the perimenopause things where you just can't quite find the word you're looking for. Word recall is an issue. But it makes it seem trivial, right? It's like, oh, that's just, and I think we talked about it in the last episode too, where I talked about hot flashes and night sweats. Those are the two things that we talk about all the time in regards to perimenopause and menopause. And they are often the butt of the joke, and yet they are vasomotor events happening in our bodies. It is literally our cardiovascular system telling us that there are significant changes happening on our inner landscape, and we need to pay attention. But we trivialize those things and make them seem like it's not a big deal. And it is. And so that's why it is so important for everyone to participate in this conversation. And when we think about workplaces, we know we lose women during childbearing years. And then we are losing women again during menopause and perimenopause. And when you look at the leadership gap that exists at the highest level of corporations, organizations, we can see why that is happening, because men literally are able to stay longer and don't need well, you know what? I'm going to reframe that. I'm not going to say that they don't need the same kind of support. They absolutely do. Right? We all do. And yet we disconnect ourselves from what we actually need. The difference in perimenopause and menopause is that our bodies are demanding that we pay attention. It no longer becomes an option of like, oh, I'm just going to push through that. Right? I mean, you could, but it's not going to get to anywhere that is helpful, that is healthful, that is productive. And so that's why it is so important to have this conversation. So when I work with organizations, the first step is always professional learning. And at this point in time, it has mostly been conversations with women. And I'm encouraging more and more for organizations to include everyone in this conversation. And so I always start with the basics, like our first podcast where we go over what is perimenopause, what is menopause, what is postmenopause, what are all the symptoms that exist. And it's always a really emotional component because you see people making connections and you can see sort of the light coming back in their eyes because so many times people come up to me after and they're like, I thought I was entering the early stages of dementia.
Wow.
And it can, yeah, because it can have that level of impact. If you're experiencing serious brain fog and word recall issues, it is really scary when you don't know what's happening. And so we sort of move through that part, and there's hope. There's also frustration, right? We also move through that when women really start asking these questions about why don't we know these things about our body?
Mm-hmm.
And because it has such an impact on how we live, on how our lives unfold. And so we sort of work through that component, and then we move into how it can play out. So I have another sort of a course that's super quick that is the top 5 symptoms of perimenopause and how they can impact you in the workplace and what you can do about it. So we get into that. And then I talk about a communication strategy. And again, this is a conversation for everyone. And it's grounded in the Ontario kindergarten curriculum, like all good things are. And we go back to our roots of what makes for good communication. And it's knowing and naming, acknowledging, and action. So those are the 3 phases. So knowing and naming is when I wake up in the morning, if I have had a really poor night's sleep for, myriad of reasons, but I wake up and I wake up exhausted, right? And then I have my whole day still facing me. What do we generally do right now when that happens? We just get up.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We brush it off, we push through. And then inevitably, I mean, if you're me, the dominoes start to fall because I'm tired and I can't make everything happen. And I end up like losing my ever loving mind at some point during the day because everything is just sort of going sideways.
Yep.
Yeah. I think most people can relate to that. So this strategy is the opposite of that. It's knowing it and naming it and saying, okay, I had a really poor sleep. I'm exhausted today. I'm going to know that about how that's going to inform the rest of my day. So that's knowing and naming, acknowledging it is that it's that, right? This is how it's going to impact my day. And how am I going to maybe shift my day and talk to the people around me to let them know what's going on? So then it might be a conversation with whoever I see in my house first in the morning. Like perhaps it's a conversation with my partner, perhaps it's a conversation with my kids, maybe it's my dog, who knows, whoever happens to be in your space, right? Is that I just want you to know I'm exhausted today. This is how you might see it playing out in me. And when you see that, this is what would be a safe way to talk about it. And if you could just take something off my plate, that would be really helpful. Because when we just push through and we pretend that everything is fine, we inevitably end up in conflict with the people around us.
Always.
And then it's right. And then our kids are wondering, like, oh, what did I do? What did I do to make this happen? It's like you existed. That's it. Like, it literally has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. So it sets the playing field for being able to have those conversations. And then the same is true when you go into work. And if it's the immediate people who are around you, if it's your manager, if it's your supervisor, whoever it is that is going to play a role in your day where there could be conflict or someone that you need help from, have that conversation. It's the same thing. So if it's my, going back to my original context, if it's my co-teacher, the person who's teaching it like in the accordion door across from me, and sometimes we do some co-planning and co-teaching together, I'm going to go to them and say, hey, I am exhausted. This is how you might see it playing out in me today. If you notice that I am starting to get like really short and teetering in a not great place with kids in my class today, can you just come over, look at me and say, hey, you're exhausted. It's okay to take a breath. I'm going to stand here while you go to the bathroom. Have 3 minutes to breathe. And then when you come back, we're going to do something together. Right? It's a much more gentle approach to living in general and to working. And it really creates a space. And especially when you are open about that with kids in your life, because it gives them permission to do the same thing and to start building that muscle. And, it's interesting because I did this exercise with a group just a couple of weeks ago. And it's uncomfortable for us as adults when we start talking in that way in our, in our 30s and our 40s, because it's not a muscle that we have trained in any way. Actually, we've let it atrophy because we have just been trained to just push through. And so it can be really challenging, and it can feel very vulnerable. I also want to say that it's also okay. Like, it's also a beautiful thing to do this if you are in a great place. Like, you could come into work and say, I had great sleep last night. I am feeling super energetic. I am at like a 10 today. So I have extra energy to give. If you need something, I'm your person today. And then you can create this give and take back and forth.
I think that communication, like if you bring it down to the very, very core of it as well, it's something that should be done like across the board, right? With
Absolutely.
strangers, with people with your kids, with your partner, with your family, like everyone. We could make the world such a better place if we would just communicate. But
Right.
it really is, there's also an ownership behind it as well. And I think that some people get caught up on that, is being able to own it. Because like you said, it makes you feel vulnerable. And we have been taught to strive for perfection so much that if we have to go outside of that to basically show that there's a flaw, which by the way, nothing is perfect. Go look at nature. Then
Absolutely.
we get this like twinge that there's something wrong with us. And I even struggled with this for a really long time until I started going through a lot of healing in my life. And I realized that if I couldn't be vulnerable, open, and honest with my teen boys, how was I going to expect them to be that way? Right? Because while we as women struggle with being open about the feminine things and losing control or our attitudes taken over and stuff, our men are going through the same things. It's just showing up differently, right? I know, for instance, that like my youngest one right now, his anger sometimes is like at a 10, like all of a sudden. He notices it as well, but it's very hard for him to be able to come back down from it for a second. But because we've had the conversations around it, he can own it. And then afterwards, he can say, I didn't mean to do that, or that wasn't toward you. So he's taken ownership, and there's a space and grace in between that I feel like we need across the board, at home, at work, even with strangers, like especially with strangers, because you never know what someone is going through. So I love this, because I do think that the key component is communication, but it's also being present with yourself, like you talked about, and then owning those pieces, whatever that looks like for that day, and just knowing that it's just part of it and it will go and something else will come in, versus, like you said, what we have been taught to, which is just push through everything, which is extremely exhausting for both men and women.
Yes. And we're seeing the results of that in the high levels of burnout that's existing in corporations, right? Like when we look at professions that are highly female dominated, nursing, teaching, anything that is caregiving, retention employees is a real challenge at this point in time. And even like I can speak specifically to the teaching field in Canada, it's really hard to get people into teaching. And I'm pretty sure it's very similar in the US.
Very similar.
Because Gen Z is looking at what we did to ourselves and they're like, yeah, hard pass. Why would I do that? That's dumb. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It was not a great way. And there's, I can't remember if we talked about this the last time, like the need for intergenerational learning is so important, right? Where, yeah, we can take some of that like beautiful boundary setting that late millennials and Gen Zs are so good at. You're like, whew, we need some of that. And then you need some of our wisdom and things that we know, that we have experienced, right? Like it's not a one-way street. And that's when things really work best, is when there is space for all of those voices to say, like, this is what I'm really good at. This is what the learning I would like to share. And then it becomes this space where everyone is valued. And again, that's another piece that's so important in the workplace, because often women at this stage of life are just unseen and unheard, right? It's like, oh, you're past your prime. You should be on your way out, when actually the opposite is true, right? Women at this stage, like humans in general who have been gaining experience, and we're talking about the menopause, perimenopause context, so I will use the term women and use it inclusively. We have a huge amount of lived experience, relationship building, institutional knowledge that is invaluable, right? If you've been with an organization for 20 years, you are a vault of everything that has happened up until this point, which helps you really deeply understand the context in which you work. And that kind of information is really important when you are making decisions moving forward, when you are welcoming new people into an organization, because you know, like, what worked, what didn't work, what are we working towards? You bring to it, your own education that you invested in, all of the professional development that has been invested in you by your organization. You are an incredibly valuable and expensive asset. Right?
Yes.
Like when I left teaching, I took with me all of that knowledge that I had learned over those years, the professional development that had been poured into me. And I was at the end of my career, I was working from kindergarten to grade 12. So I knew our system from top to bottom, inside and out, and I just left with all of that. And it's like, it's helping me now in the work that I'm doing. Like, it's been valuable for me.
Yeah.
And it left a bit of a void in my organization. And that, I think, is something for institutional leaders to hear and pay attention to. It is in your best interest, leaders, to invest in your employees, in your leaders who are at this stage in their career, because there is so much that we bring. And as we move through into menopause, there's also this like deep connection to self that allows us to show up as ourselves more. We often, not always, but have less distraction happening in our lives, because both my kids went to university in September. And so I don't have that, I don't have all that, the family, right, that's supporting me. And there is so much value. So policy, and that's the other piece that's really important when I'm working with organizations. And I know most people, they hear the word policy and their eyes glaze over, which I totally understand. And to me, it's exciting because it's what sets the conditions, right? Because menopause and perimenopause is not an easy conversation for everyone to have with their likely male counterpart and supervisor.
Yeah.
And so when there just is that, like, that policy in place, be it anything from as simple as ice packs in a freezer that are accessible, because if you happen to have a hot flush at work, an ice pack on the back of the neck is heaven. And it really helps too, because it constricts the blood vessels, right? So a hot flush is our blood vessels expanding, trying to get rid of all of that heat. And so an ice pack causes some contraction, which will help bring the hot flush down. So it can be as simple as ice packs and like a place to go and change if you need to, and ability to adjust the temperature in your own workspace, all the way up to flexible work hours and menopause leave, and everything in between, depending on where your organization is in its its readiness and its ability to implement those things.
I love that. And I think that that's so simple, like ice packs, like you said, or a place that they can change in case you sweat through everything, which I do anyway, and I'm not in it yet. So I get it, right? But
Yeah.
it makes so much sense. And I think that that's where we forget, is that we overcomplicate thinking, but there's going to be all these things we're going to have to do and all these people we're going to have to cater to. And it's like, but it's not really catering. There's actually super simple things that you can do that just create more of an open space to know that you accept them at the space that they are at. Just like we have maternity leave, where we should be accepting them for the place that they're at, which is starting a family. And so this is just another level. So as we talk about the workplace, I want to kind of wrap this also into the home dynamics as well, because I think this is a super important, not only for your spouse or your partner and having these conversations. Obviously, communication and owning it on both sides is going to be huge. What about talking about this with your kids?
Yeah, it's really important, because they're seeing you change. And if we're not transparent about what's happening, they can take that on, right? As like, oh, there's something really different with my mom. Like, what is happening with her? Again, I can't remember if I told the story in the last episode or not, but I was introduced to this like 24-year-old at a networking event. And, I introduced myself and what I do. You can see him like, I need to get out of this conversation. But what he did do in the end was say, well, tell me about what you do. And so I started talking about menopause and perimenopause and how it can play out in our lives. And he said, I wish I had really known about this when I was a teenager, because now I'm understanding that I was on my hormonal ride, and so was my mom, intersected in some really hard ways. And if I had known, I think it could have really changed our relationship. And that was a really powerful moment for me. And I, was a catalyst for having those conversations with my own boys. And obviously this is the work I do. So they're kind of like marinated in it. They know a lot about perimenopause and menopause, which is great. I love that. Because it gives them a wider understanding of someone else's experience. And how important it is to know what's happening in our bodies. And I'm going to keep saying this, but the way that like our bodies intersect with the context of the rest of our lives, we can't separate them. When you were talking about your son and the rage, I was like, right. Because at his stage of development, testosterone levels are increasing in his body. And it feels different. And for lots of boys, that it has that rage effect. And when you don't know, and suddenly you just feel rage all the time, then there's also the fear element that starts to creep in, right? Of like, well, what's wrong with me? I didn't used to feel like this. Why do I feel like this all the time? So knowing the role that these hormones play in our lives, because it's not just, we have like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. We have, again, going back to the beginning, trivialized them to, oh, it's just like sex and reproduction. And not that sex and reproduction are trivial, because they're not, right? Those are major aspects of the human experience, but we've sort of put it in this box of, oh, it's just that. But estrogen, testosterone, they have impacts on every system in our body. It is not just sex. It is not just a desire. It is not just reproduction. Like for women, our whole bodies are covered in estrogen neuroreceptors. So it has impacts on our brain. It has impacts on our cardio. It has impacts on our digestive systems, our skin. vision, our teeth. And I just heard a statistics recently that 1 in 5 women will lose teeth in the first few years of perimenopause. Like,
Wow.
yeah, it impacts everything. And when we don't talk about it and we don't know, that's where all of the issues come from. It's that lack of knowing and knowledge. And so
Hmm.
having those conversations with our family members. So if you have daughters, one, so that they know the full breadth of what their reproductive life will be, right? From pre-menstruation, menstruation, what happens during that time, childbearing, and then perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. Because this is a full lifetime journey. It doesn't just
Hmm.
happen in these discrete age ranges. And so having those real open and honest conversations with our daughters and our sons and everybody in between it's that creates a sense of freedom for everybody.
Yeah. And this is so important too, especially, as a boy mom, of having
Mhm.
this conversation with our young boys as well. And I I want to like drill this into people's brains, like you were saying earlier, that it's not something we should just wash over. Because I know that there's a lot of people that are like, well, yeah, I just told my kid it's fine. This is normal. What you're going through is fine. Everybody goes through it. And then you just like leave it alone. No, like we need validation and there needs to be
Mhm.
conversation. I'll use my son as an example. We literally just a couple weeks ago had this conversation. I went in his room and he was like, he broke down and I asked him what was wrong. And he was like, I'm just a horrible person. I was like, wait a minute, what? Why? And he was like, I get so angry and I can't control it and I hate it. And dad, and he just kept going on. And I was like, I said something mean to my girlfriend and I didn't mean it. I was like, okay, let's talk about this. And so we went through like, what are you feeling? What do you know? It's like, what did you do afterwards? And he was like, well, I apologize. And I told her that I just got mad and then, this, and this. And I'm like, great. So you're human, love. Like, that's
Mhm.
fantastic. And I remember him just looking at me like the light bulb had not caught up yet of like, that is okay. And he was like, yeah, but I can't control it. I said, honey, I couldn't control it at that age. I said, your brother, look at him. He had a hard time. Like, this is part of it. But the fact that you recognize it, you
Yeah.
know it, and you own it, I said, that is more than what a lot of people are doing at your age. And like I told him, and I hope that everybody hears this as well. When he was like, I'm such a bad person, I'm set, this, and this, I was like, here's the thing. People that really are bad people don't think about them being bad people. They just are who they are and they don't really
Yeah, they're
care,
not
right?
self-aware. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you meet
Yeah.
someone that is very narcissistic, they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm narcissistic. They're not going to Google it and be like, why am I being this way? They own who that is of them because they don't know any different. I said, so the fact that
Yeah.
you own it and you know that something is going on, I said, means you are not that kind of a person. It's just something that you are going through. And I think that we as a whole in every generation need to remember that as well. When you can recognize what is going on and if something is off, that is something to be addressed. It doesn't mean that you're this type of, there's no reason to label yourself as that type of a person. But what it does mean is maybe you can start researching. Maybe you can go to a doctor and have conversations. Maybe you can start talking with people at home and be like, hey, I'm starting to notice this. If you start to see me doing this, will you let me know? And then you can kind of follow the patterns, which I think is going to help you
Yes.
even more when you advocate for yourself as a doctor, which we talked about this the last
Yeah.
time of like advocating in your doctor's office, because unfortunately, there's a lot of them that are still getting this research and knowledge and diagnoses and things in as well. And especially if you have those that have been in the field for quite a long time, a lot of them are already kind of stuck in their ways. Sorry, people, but I'm just going to go by what I've seen. And so they're
Mhm.
like, oh, it's fine. And they brush it off. So you have to be willing to know, no, this is what my body's going through. No, this is what my family has been telling me. These are the patterns that we're seeing. And then find someone that you can have that conversation with where you are side by side, not doctor and you are patient. And therefore you're just supposed to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things in what you said there. And going back to your son, it's a really great way when we approach emotions in this way. It's how we stay connected to our bodies, right? Like our generation kind of escaped our bodies. We're like, I don't
Yeah.
know, this is not a comfortable place to be. I don't really want to be in here. I'm just going to live up here in my brain. And that does a huge disservice to
Yep.
us in so many ways. And so having those conversations, empowering them with the knowledge of like, this is literally what's happening in your body. So one of the things I want you to do is when you start feeling angry, pay attention to what are you feeling in your body? Is your heart rate increasing? Does your vision narrow? Do you breathe more shallowly? Do you start to sweat? And
Mm-hmm.
then those things often happen before, right? Because of an emotion hits, our bodies react, which is energy expensive, and so gives us less space for processing the emotion in a way that is manageable. I'm going to use those words. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have less energy, and so we do these things where we just like freak out, right? Or break down or whatever it is. And I'm not saying like sometimes that's necessary,
Yeah.
right? Our bodies need to, especially when we think about tears and crying, like our bodies need to release those tears. We need to release all of that that otherwise stays trapped in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And teaching the men in our lives that as well is another gift instead of that narrative of, suck it up, boys don't cry, all of that stuff that we've seen, how that has so negatively impacted so many men in our lives, is giving them that gift of like, look, this is a physical reaction of your body and your body needs to do it. So when you
Yeah.
feel like you need to release some, like if you feel like you have a sob and you have tears that need to come out, let them out, because it will be 5-10 minutes of letting that out. And then you feel so much better.
So
And you
much better.
so much better. And you have so much more space again to be able to handle all of this stuff because you've had that release. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, approaching it from that, like, look, this is a physical reaction to context and things that are happening around us. And let's be real and honest about that.
Mm-hmm. I love every piece of this, especially when it comes to actually handling your emotions. I mean, I grew up with, you're strong, you do this, you make it
Yeah.
through, that kind of a thing. And I didn't realize that I had pushed that onto my boys as well. And, I remember being that person that being upset or crying, I was like, this feels stupid. I feel dumb. This is
Mhm.
ridiculous, or all those different things. And it's really interesting to see now when I allow space for that. Bless my poor husband. Like there's been times where he'll come in the bathroom. He's like, wait, what's going on? I thought you were just fine. And I'm like, I'm fine. It's just a moment. Just leave me alone. But it's really interesting because now that I've learned to make space for that, I
Mhm.
can literally get in the shower. I can have 5 or 7 minutes and then come out and I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. Like it's
Yeah.
it's like washing so much away. And that is something that I
Yes.
really started working with my boys on as well, which meant they had to see mom be that way as well, instead of always
Mhm.
being strong in front of them. And I think that's something that we all really struggle with, is letting other people see certain things because we've been taught what is weakness, what is vulnerable, and what is not. And to be completely honest, I'm going to call BS on every
Yeah.
bit of it, but
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
transitioning everything in our society. And I do think that it starts with your home dynamics as well, especially if you have kids. It is so important to have these conversations, to sit down and have, I mean, we sat down and we had family nights and I was like, okay, mom can't do it
Mhm.
anymore. And I would tell them,
Yep.
I'm like, this is what's going on. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm handling. And I actually got called out by my kids. My oldest one actually called me out and was like, well, then why are you doing that? And I was like, because I've
Yeah.
always done it. He was like, okay, but like we can do it. I'm like, okay, but when I say something, nobody does it. He was like, then just ask. was like, but it was like this moment of like, I put more on myself because I've always seen myself as the strong one and the one to get things done, that I wasn't even allowing them the space to be able to help me. And so having those kinds of conversations at home really, really helped for me to feel like, okay, when I know that I am slammed or I know that I'm having a day, I can reach out and be like, hey, I do not got this today. What can you
Mhm.
do? And it's amazing how much you actually empower the person on the other side, male or female, to do something else that's going to help you. And that's really what I feel like community and society is supposed to be about. But we've created so much separation and segmentation that we have forgotten that's the
Mhm.
most important part. So just this whole conversation is just absolutely wonderful. I think that especially as we're going into the new year, people need to look at how do I want to do things differently, and not necessarily just weight loss and all the fads that all come out there, but how can I elevate my conversations? How can I elevate my communication? How can I elevate how we validate and give grace and space for other people? And is that actually going to make a difference in my world? And then, add in all the other physical things and stuff that you want to do. But I am going to strongly suggest to everybody listening that, like, think about your 2025 and how you want things to be differently, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And, the emotional intimacy is what has kept coming up in my head as you've been talking. And it's easier to start developing that when you aren't in a crisis. Okay.
Mm,
So that's why it is like, so starting your 2025 by thinking about, yeah, how do I want to feel, and how do I want to feel in my relationships? And I just wanted to share this one story because it really made me, when you were talking, I was thinking about it a lot in terms of how we interact with our partners. And it was shortly, not long after my mom had passed, sobbing because, of course, I did it in the shower where I thought nobody would hear me. Right. So I'm in the shower sobbing, and my husband came in and he got into the shower with me, fully clothed, and just held me. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to make me stop. He just was there. And that moment has been a foundational moment for the rest of our relationship, because I know that in moments where I really need him, he will show up and get into the shower in his clothes and get soaking wet. And that, like, when that is, and although that did happen that was in a sort of crisisy kind of time, but it became sort of the standard of how we are for each other for the rest of our relationship. And so often when women come to me and they're in perimenopause and menopause, their relationships also are often in crisis, be
mm,
it with their kids, be it with their partner, whoever it is that's around them, because in many cases, that emotional intimacy hasn't necessarily been there. And there's been a buildup of resentment over a long period of time. And then these physical changes start happening in our body where we just have less room and capacity to manage the resentment that we've been holding on to. And it's the match that lights the fire.
mhm.
And and it can, I've had some women who have ended up divorced and then realized that what they were experiencing was perimenopause and menopause, and they didn't necessarily want to be divorced. Like, yes, there were issues in their relationship that they needed to work on, but it didn't need to go this way had they known or understood what was going on in their bodies. And so this communication with our partners is so important. And I just started a series. So on Tuesdays, I am creating little videos for men and just giving them like super simple things that they can do to support their partners. So this week was um, do something that your partner loves. If it's a manicure, a pedicure, a massage, whatever. If you don't know what that is, reach out to one of their friends, because their friends will tell you, and they'll tell you exactly where to book. you go ahead and book it. Book that pedicure, put it on her calendar. Don't ask any questions. Like, just do it. And then think about what is one thing that she would be stressed about having to do because she's now getting a pedicure, because we do that, right? We're like, oh, I'm doing this nice thing for myself, but now like I'm behind on this, and the other thing. So I was like, just think about one thing. Maybe just while she's there, throw in a load of laundry, clean a bathroom, maybe pick up the kids from school. Like, it doesn't have to be anything major, but just these little moments of care and I see you go a long way to building that emotional intimacy that will keep you connected through the more turbulent times.
Yeah. I love that so much. We're going to end on emotional intimacy. I think that that's like the best way to end anything. So, Lisa, I can't thank you enough again for coming on here for part 2 and just really kind of filling people in on how to advocate, how to support, not only at home, but in the workplace as well. Please do me a favor and tell everybody where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and how they can be in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest place is probably Instagram. So I am at Boate on Instagram, and all of my contact information is there. My website is liberatedmenopause.ca. That's another great place. And yeah, I work individually with folks. I work with organizations, like I said, and my podcast, which Kat has been on before too, so you can check out that episode. My podcast is Transforming 45. So yeah, jump in. This is a really beautiful, exciting, and powerful community to be in.
I'm so excited. And definitely check out you on Tuesdays. Is it on Instagram is where it's listed?
It is on Instagram. Check it out and share it with your partners.
Yeah.
Like, let me do the hard work for you. You got enough on your plate. Let me say the things for you.
Just share the little message, just share the little comment. I think it's fantastic. And I love that you are creating this space for both men and women. I do believe that we need to desperately move into a time where we are co-creating, co-collaborating, and working together to understand both sides and giving each other grace and space and understanding. So thank you again, Lisa, so much for being on here today. To everybody else that's out there, I hope you were taking notes. Again, if you have not watched part 1, please go back and find part 1, where Lisa really dives into perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and all the pieces that are combined. And you can listen to me be mind blown with some of the statistics and things that she shares. Be sure to make sure that you are following her, share her information with other women and other men in your lives to start educating more people about what is going on. I was really surprised at how much I did not know, and I am a chick. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of us that don't know jack. So until next time, please do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable